On the 20th of November in 1969, 3 days after Apollo 12 landed, NASA crashed the lunar module into the moon at 6,048 kilometers per hour. The impact released energy equivalent to 1 ton of TNT, and seismometers 72 kilometers away recorded the collision. Then what happened after that was pretty surprising to a lot of very smart people. You see, the moon, it rang like a bell. The moon, the rock in the sky. I might get exiled from Athens for saying that, but the moon rang like a bell because a piece of metal crashed into it. That seems really strange. And you know why it rang like a bell? Because the moon's hollow.
I want to talk about the moon landing. That was the first. So my editor, who you met, Darren, knows all about this stuff, and he's the one that got me interested in it. And so I started looking things up on the internet and came across you, and I was like, this is by far the best explanation I've ever heard. It's all in there. At least I think it's all in there. And so I want to dive in there. What got you interested in the moon landing?
That was an episode that people just demanded. I didn't want to do it because everyone's done the moon landing. And are you talking about the Stanley Kubrick one? Because I've done a few moon videos. I think I have a whole compilation.
I probably watched all of them, but I know the Stanley Kubrick thing was in there, how the shadows don't align. But let's go into it. I want to hear all of it.
So I debunked a lot of that moon landing stuff. A lot of that episode is based on Bart Sibrel's. Bart Sibrel, it had a documentary quite a while ago, maybe 20 years. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, I think is the name of it. And if you're into the moon stuff, that's the documentary to watch. And Bart's someone who I trade email with, who I told him, I'm as soon as I'm ready, I got to have you in here because he knows everything about it. But I debunked a lot of his stuff in the documentary, but I couldn't debunk all of it. There were some weird things about, when you see the astronauts and it looks like there's wires, reflections off the wires. It's hard to explain that. I tried to. I said, the way that piece of equipment is, it could be this, but I agree it looks weird. And the way the astronauts fall doesn't look natural. But it's 1/6 gravity. It could be weird. I try to be open-minded to all of it. It's an episode that still confounds me. I go back and forth depending on who I talk to about whether it really happened. And I think the percentage of Americans who don't believe that we went to the moon is just rising every year. I hope I have nothing to do with that.
I'm sure you have something to do with that.
But they lost the tapes, all the original tapes of the moon landing. What you watch when Neil Armstrong climbs off the LEM, One Small Step for Man, that's not a direct feed from anything. That was projected on a wall in NASA, and the networks aimed their camera at the wall to get like this projection, and the networks were like, "Hey, can we just get the direct feed? Because that would be a lot better." And they're like, "No, we're going to do it this way." And then they lost all those tapes. They lost the telemetry. And when asked why don't we go back, NASA said, "Well, we can't replicate that technology. It's too difficult."
Yeah, isn't there like some I don't know what you call it. We can't get past a certain point, supposedly. And they said I think it was your episode. They're like, we lost the technology. It's like you lost the technology to get us to the moon. You just happened to lose it.
Nobody wrote.
Where did it go?
They just lost it. You might be talking about the Van Allen radiation belt.
That's it.
Right, which is high velocity particles. And it's this energetic field that surrounds the Earth and is very dangerous. And if you're aware of something called the South Atlantic anomaly, it's this part of our geomagnetic field that is it's burning a hole through it. If you look at it on on like an electromagnetic map, it's just a big hole. It's getting bigger, and now it's starting to branch off into a second one, and nobody knows why that's happening. And geomagnetism and the pole shifts and all that, I can go down that rabbit hole too, because all that stuff terrifies me.
Do it.
Solar radiation and the grid going down, all that stuff terrifies me. So the Van Allen radiation belts, that you have NASA astronauts saying, "Oh, we think we found a way now that we can get out of, high Earth orbit, that we can finally get past the Van Allen radiation belts." It's like, we already did that, man, didn't we? Didn't we do that 17 times or whatever? But they forgot. They lost it. Can't replicate it.
Unbelievable.
I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either.
So just let us know what's going on.
On top of that, there was a space race or a race to the moon between us and Russia during the Cold War, right?
There was. And Russia was first to everything. We were behind on everything. Russia has first, Sputnik goes up, Sputnik 2 goes, so first man-made satellite in orbit, first man in orbit, first animal in orbit, first woman in orbit, first spacewalk, first geostationary satellites, all first. And we're falling behind. And you can hear JFK giving speeches, and they're pressing him on it. And like the Saturn program's not going well, and the rockets are blowing up on the launch pads. And he's saying, like, no matter how much money we throw at it, we're going to be second. We're going to be second. You can hear him talking about it. And then suddenly, 1969, we're there. We surpass all of it. We surpass all of the Soviets' accomplishments, and we go and we land on the moon. Okay. It seemed like we took a great leap forward there, but there's really no explanation for it.
Well, I want to talk about the hollow moon.
Okay.
Is the moon hollow?
Man.
I've not dug into this. I had a side
weird.
Conversation with Randall Carlson once, and he's the one that brought it up. I have not seen this episode of yours.
It's a fun one. That was Gino, my brother, said, you got to do this one. And it's like, hollow moon, that is nonsense. And then I'm researching the episode, and I just start to realize that there's a lot of weird stuff about the moon. And by the time I was done with the episode, I was convinced that it was hollow. But there's a lot of weird things that have happened with the moon. Like, first of all, the moon is too big to be here. It's just too big. We've never found another system in our solar system or any other that has this giant moon right next to us like this. This is totally unique. We haven't found a moon that has such a perfect orbit like this, that also the same side faces us all the way. We're a snowflake with this, totally unique. So that's strange.
No shit, I didn't realize that.
No, we haven't found
We
it
have the
anywhere.
only moon that we know of that doesn't rotate.
No, there are a few moons that are tidally locked like that.
Okay.
But it's rare. But when you stack up all these coincidences, it starts to paint a picture like the moon is weird. A lot of people will point to the fact that the moon during the eclipse is like the perfect size to block out the sun, because it's like a 400-to-1 ratio. That's fair, but the moon at one point was a lot closer to the Earth, and it's drifting away. So at some point, it's not going to be perfect anymore. But the moon, the far side the crust is different, older, and much thicker, and fewer impacts are on the far side that are on the near side. When you think it would be the opposite, because that's kind of like should be grabbing things as they come in, but instead there's not as many impacts on that side. When during one of the Apollo missions, as a seismic test, they crashed one of the rockets into the moon just to take readings, seismograph readings, to see what was going on there. And the phrase is, the moon rang like a bell for over an hour. So if you set off like seismic charges here to measure sound waves that go through the Earth, as they go through the Earth, they slow down as they go through all this dense matter and then through the mantle and the core. Like, it just slows down. The moon, they don't do that. The sound waves sped up and started to bounce all around in there and started to like reverberate for a long time. And no one could really explain that. Now, the prevailing theory, the mainstream theory, is that the moon is a lot less dense than the Earth because it was created from the Earth's crust and the upper mantle, which is less dense, which is why the moon is less dense. So the interior has maybe some hollow spaces, or it's just it's not quite as dense. That's why. Okay, but the sound waves bounced around for a long time. There was a long time.
This is true.
This is true.
What hit it again?
They dropped one of the rocket boosters. They just crashed it in there. But they did seismograph readings in subsequent missions there, where they actually drop in like explosives, control explosives, and they just take the readings and see what happens to the sound waves. It's a normal scientific thing to do. I think they were just surprised. There's been a couple of NASA scientists who've even said it would make a lot more sense that the moon wasn't here than the fact that it is, because there's so many strange things about it. And we see light on the moon all the time. They're called transient lunar phenomena, where you just see these just light flashes on the moon all the time. And if you have binoculars, you can even see this. In one of the moon craters, I think it's the Aristarchus crater, there's this blue glowing light that just appears from time to time and then goes away, and then it appears again. They call it the blue gem.
What?
And you can see it. So what's causing the light up there? Well, mainstream scientists will say, well, you're seeing flashes because the moon it's a lot like glass. It's very glassy and reflective, so you're seeing that. But we'll see light just go across. You'll just see light zip across. And then what's the blue light in that same crater that we've been seeing since 17th century? It's Aristarchus or Aristarchus crater, I think is how you say it. Blue light. What is that? And now they're seeing, just very recently, like this year, these swirls of light and gases happening on the moon, different places. They don't understand it. There was one point where the moon doesn't really have an atmosphere. It has a tiny one, doesn't really have one. But for a little while it did. There was just all this water vapor in the air on the moon that came from somewhere and then just disappeared. So I don't know what that is. And then you've had people who have seen pictures, like I've talked about Carl Wolf, who was U.S. Air Force, and he was like a technician. He basically the level is a copy repairman, and he's called in to fix some imaging equipment at NASA or Air Force, wherever. And he walks in there, and he's like an airman, and he sees another young guy, and he's like, "Oh, Carl, you got to see this." And Carl looks, he's like, "What am I looking at?" He's like, "This is the backside of the moon. There's like cities there and stuff. There's mushroom-shaped things and towers and highways and all this stuff." Carl's like, "This is amazing. I can't believe it." And Carl said he went home, he told his wife, and he said he was watching the news, waiting for this to show up on the news, but it never did. And you could see those photos allegedly, and I used them in one of my episodes, and it looks like a civilization on the far side of the moon. Carl, unfortunately, was met with an untimely death. He got hit by a car when he was riding his bike, so we don't know much more from Carl.
Yep.